arrested without cause and mocked by two arrogant officers. But the moment they threw him in a cell, they triggered something much bigger, an FBI raid they never saw coming. "Sir, you can't just walk back there." That was the first thing Terrence Mallory heard when he stepped into the 4th Street Police Precinct in downtown Raleigh. His boots were still damp from the morning drizzle, and his navy blue work uniform had specks of dust and rust from the courthouse basement pipes he'd been inspecting earlier. He wasn't there to cause trouble. He thought he was doing the right thing. Terrence had worked maintenance at the Joseph P. Stanley Federal Courthouse for nearly 18 years. Quiet, reliable, and good with his hands, he was the kind of man who fixed broken things without needing recognition. Most people just called him T, and he was fine with that. He wasn't flashy, didn't raise his voice, didn't seek confrontation. But that morning, something didn't sit right. He had seen two men near a restricted lot behind the courthouse, loitering around a black Chevy Impala with out-of-state plates. One of them had slipped something under the trunk before disappearing into the side alley. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt off, especially since the same lot had been mentioned in a security meeting a few weeks back. Terrence didn't waste time. He grabbed his ID badge, tossed his tool bag in the van, and drove straight to the nearest precinct. But now he was standing in the middle of a tiled lobby, getting stared down by a pale officer with a buzz cut and an attitude. "I work at the federal courthouse," Terrence said, keeping his voice calm. "I saw something suspicious near the loading dock. Figured I should bring it to someone." The officer narrowed his eyes. "You are janitor?" "I'm maintenance. Been there almost 20 years." Another voice chimed in from the side. Detective Ray Coulson, tall, broad-shouldered, with a habit of chewing gum like it owed him money, stepped forward. "What's in the bag?" "My tools." Coulson walked over and grabbed the bag from Terrence's hand without asking. "You can't just walk into a police station saying, 'I saw something suspicious,' and expect us to jump." "I'm just reporting what I saw. There were two guys. One of them left something under a car, thought it might be drugs or a weapon." Officer Blake Mercer, younger and wearing mirrored sunglasses inside, walked over and looked Terrence up and down. "You sure you weren't the one leaving something?" Terrence blinked. "Excuse me." "You match a description," Mercer added. "Dark clothes, utility bag, seen walking near a government building." Terrence let out a breath and pulled out his ID. "Look, I work in the building. Joseph P. Stanley Courthouse. My supervisor's name is Rodney Keene. Call him." But they didn't call anyone. Coulson grabbed the ID, barely looked at it, then dropped it on the desk. "You're loitering and refusing to comply," he said flatly. "Let's go." "What?" Terrence took a step back. "You can't be serious. I came to report something, that's all." Coulson didn't answer. He pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Terrence raised his hand slightly, not aggressively, just to slow things down. "You're arresting me for what?" "Obstruction, trespassing, maybe lying to an officer. We'll figure it out," Coulson muttered. Just like that, his wrists were clamped behind his back. The precinct lobby was nearly empty save for a bored-looking desk clerk and a woman waiting to pay a ticket. No one said anything. No one stepped in. Terrence was walked through the corridor like a criminal, his ID left sitting face down on the desk. As he was led down a hallway, Terrence glanced at a bulletin board. A photocopied image caught his eye. It was a still from a surveillance camera showing the same parking lot, the same black Impala. But now he wasn't a witness. He was in a holding cell. The cell smelled like bleach and dust. Terrence sat on the bench, elbows on his knees, processing how quickly things had turned. 1 second he was doing what he thought was right. The next, his belt and shoelaces were in a bin, and his dignity felt checked at the door. He stared at the cinder block wall, then down at his hands, calloused, dry, a couple of small cuts from tightening pipes the day before. These were working hands, honest hands. He rubbed them together slowly. The only sound in a room meant to make people feel invisible. Hey, what they get you for? Terrence turned. Another man, maybe in his late 20s, sat on the opposite bench. Thin, jittery, eyes darting. He wore a faded sweatshirt and busted Air Jordans. Loitering, apparently, Terrence said. And obstruction. The man let out a short laugh. They always make stuff up when they ain't got a real reason. He leaned back. Name's Darnell. Terrence. Darnell studied him. You don't look like you belong here. I don't. Darnell nodded slowly. They get nervous when they see someone who knows how to carry themselves, especially if he looks like you. Before Terrence could respond, the door clicked. Officer Mercer stepped in, holding a clipboard. Mallory, you got someone to call? I already told your partner. Call my supervisor, Rodney Keene, Joseph P. Stanley Courthouse, Maintenance Department. Mercer gave a lazy shrug. That's not how it works. You give me a number, or you sit here till someone cares enough to find you. Terrence stared at him but didn't respond. Mercer knocked on the cell bars. Suit yourself, he muttered, walking away. A few minutes passed. The buzz of fluorescent lights dug into Terrence's head, and then a low voice from the hallway. You say he works at the courthouse? It was someone new. Older, measured tone, not the bark of Coulson or the swagger of Mercer. Yeah, but it don't matter, Mercer replied. He came in rambling about some car, had a whole story rehearsed. Guy's probably trying to set us up. There was a pause, then the older voice spoke again. You checked the ID? Mercer didn't answer. You didn't check the ID, did you? The older voice pressed. I mean, Coulson looked at it? That's not what I asked. Footsteps receded. Terrence sat back down. He didn't trust easily, but that voice, it felt different. Back at the desk, Sergeant Charles Petrie was flipping through intake reports when he found Terrence's file. Something wasn't adding up. He pulled the ID Coulson had tossed aside and scanned it. His eyes narrowed. Federal employee, level 3 clearance, long service record. Sergeant Petrie looked up and walked over to Coulson's desk. Where is he? In holding? Why? This man's been working with the federal court since 2005. You didn't call to verify anything? You just cuffed him based on what? His outfit? Coulson shrugged. Guy looks suspicious. Tool bag, courthouse, wrong place at the wrong time. That's not suspicious. That's called a job. Coulson didn't respond. Petrie sighed and walked off, but the damage had already started. Outside the station, someone else had noticed Terrence was missing. Rodney Keene, head of maintenance at the courthouse, managed a crew of 12 and had dealt with everything from asbestos scares to flooded archives. But when Terrence hadn't returned from his break after nearly an hour, something felt wrong. Terrence wasn't the type to disappear without a call. Rodney called Terrence's number, straight to voicemail. He stared out the window of his second-floor office, eyes fixed on the rear lot. That morning, Terrence had mentioned something about the Chevy Impala parked near the fencing. Said it didn't feel right. Rodney had waved it off, told him to just write it up if it looked off. But now, pieces were clicking together. He called the precinct. 4th Street Police, Officer Danvers speaking. Hi, I'm looking for someone who might have come by there. Terrence Mallory, works maintenance for the federal courthouse down the road. Dark uniform, probably carrying a tool bag. There was a pause, a keyboard clicking in the background. Yeah, we've got a Mallory in holding, Danvers said flatly. Came in earlier. Charges pending. Rodney sat back in his chair. What? What the hell for? Obstruction? Trespassing? Loitering? Rodney scoffed. He works for the government. Did anyone even bother checking his credentials? Sir, I'm just relaying what's on the sheet here. Rodney hung up and immediately called an internal contact he only used in emergencies. His voice was sharp, urgent. "We got a problem." Back at the precinct, Terrence sat with his head against the wall. Darnell had been released, and now it was just him in the cell. No updates, no voices, just the steady hum of overhead lights and distant ringing phones. Then something shifted. Outside, tires screeched against pavement, not loud, but deliberate. Two matte black SUVs pulled up in front of the station. No lights, no sirens, but anyone paying attention would have noticed four men in dark suits stepping out in sync, eyes alert, movements tight. Inside, the front desk clerk looked up as they entered. The first agent flashed a badge. "We need to speak with your commanding officer, now." Back in the holding cell, Terrence heard the commotion, voices getting sharper, footsteps quickening. He stood up, unsure what was happening. His heart picked up speed, but not from fear. Down the hallway, Coulson was at his desk when Petrie walked up briskly. "We've got company," Petrie said under his breath. "Who?" "Feds." Coulson's gum stopped mid-chew. Three agents stepped into the hallway. The lead agent, a woman in her early 40s with tightly pulled back hair and sharp eyes, handed Petrie a sealed envelope. "Federal warrants, internal review. Open it." Coulson stood up. "Hold on, what's this about?" The agent turned to him. "You're Detective Ray Coulson, correct?" He gave a slow nod. "You're coming with us, right now." Another agent stepped past them, moving toward the cells. Terrence heard keys clatter. The door swung open. "Mr. Mallory," the agent said. Terrence stepped forward cautiously. "Yeah?" "We're here on behalf of the Justice Department. You're free to go." Terrence blinked. "Just like that?" The agent gave a small nod. "Your arrest was not authorized." Terrence stepped into the hallway, blinking under the brighter lights. Officers around the bullpen had stopped what they were doing. Where earlier there was suspicion and mockery, now there was confusion and fear. Coulson stood frozen near his desk. Mercer had taken off his mirrored shades, hands resting uncertainly on his belt. For the first time since Terrence had walked in, neither of them had anything smart to say. The agent guiding Terrence didn't break stride. "We're removing you from the premises. Just stay close." At the front desk, Sergeant Petrie was opening the sealed packet. His brow furrowed as he scanned the contents. Pages of names, dates, surveillance timestamps, internal memos, complaints that had been dismissed. One name came up over and over again: Coulson. Another, Mercer. There had been whispers for a while. Officers getting too aggressive during patrols. Evidence that vanished. Arrests made without reports. Petrie always suspected something but never had the pieces. Now the pieces were being brought to his door, bound and numbered. Terrence reached the lobby where two agents stood waiting. One held a clipboard. The other had a small recorder. The taller one turned to him. "Mr. Mallory, we're going to walk you to our vehicle. You're not under arrest. You're not being detained. You're a witness, and your cooperation has helped us move forward with something much larger than you realize." "I just wanted to report what I saw," Terrence replied quietly. "And you did. That act kicked down a wall we've been hitting for months." Out in the parking lot, the air felt damp and heavy. The same Chevy Impala Terrence had reported earlier was now sitting behind police tape. Two agents were circling it carefully, taking photos, examining the trunk with gloved hands. Rodney Keene stood off to the side, pacing with a cell phone. The moment he spotted Terrence, he rushed over. "T," he said, voice urgent. "You all right?" Terrence nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think so." Rodney glanced at the agents. "They told me what happened. I called Internal Affairs. Then I called Lisa Conway at the district office. I didn't know it would escalate like this." "I didn't either." "You know they had no right to put hands on you, right?" Terrence gave a dry chuckle. They didn't even look at my ID. From behind them, the station doors opened again. Two officers escorted Coulson out, his arms behind his back, face blank. Mercer followed minutes later, flanked by two agents. No cuffs yet, but his hands were trembling. A news van had already arrived across the street. A small crowd had formed on the sidewalk, filming with their phones. Rodney looked over at Terrence again. "You sure you're okay?" "I've been better," Terrence said, "but I'm glad I said something. I almost didn't." Rodney clapped him gently on the shoulder. "They'll write about this. Probably make it messy. You know how people get when they see uniforms under fire." Terrence nodded. "Let them write. I just want the truth out." An agent stepped closer. "Mr. Mallory, we'll need a full statement. You can do it at the courthouse, or we can take you to the regional field office. Your call." Terrence glanced toward the courthouse tower peeking above the skyline. "I'd rather go home, but I'll give you what you need." The next morning, headlines were already circulating. Federal agents raid Raleigh Police Precinct following wrongful arrest. Maintenance worker mistaken for suspect triggers FBI corruption probe. Two officers suspended in wake of surprise, federal sweep. But behind those words was something messier, something more human. Terrence sat at his kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes. He hadn't slept much, not from fear, though that lingered, but from the kind of restless thinking that doesn't let your mind sit still. Across from him sat Agent Corinne Vega, sipping coffee. She'd come by early, saying it would be more comfortable to talk here than haul him into a formal office. "Terrence, I need you to walk me through everything from the parking lot to the moment they put cuffs on you." He leaned back, folded his arms. "I already told one of your guys." "I know, but I need the full version, with the details only you remember." Terrence exhaled. "Fine. I saw the black Impala just after 9. Same car that was flagged in that security meeting 3 weeks ago. Two men, white, dark hoodies. One popped the trunk, placed something under. By the time I circled back, they were gone. The car was still there. I thought about ignoring it, but it felt off." "You took the right step," Vega said gently. "Didn't feel like it when I ended up in a cage. They never ran your ID, never called the courthouse. Coulson's had a pattern of ignoring protocol, especially with black civilians." Her grip on her pen tightened. Terrence gave a half smile. "I figured." He looked at me like I was the problem before I opened my mouth. "That's what made yesterday important. We've had complaints, at least 9 filed in the last 2 years, all quieted down internally. But your arrest? That gave us the opening we needed. It was in a controlled space, logged on security footage, completely unjustified." Terrence rubbed his face. "I wasn't trying to get anyone fired." "You didn't. Their behavior got them fired. You just brought light into the room." There was a knock on the door. Rodney stepped in, holding a newspaper and a brown paper bag. "I brought egg sandwiches," he said. "And this." He dropped the paper on the table. "Routine tip-off sparks federal crackdown on police corruption." Rodney pointed at the photo beneath the headline, Coulson being escorted out of the precinct. "Somebody posted the full arrest video online. It's everywhere." Terrence shook his head. "I didn't ask for this." "Yeah, but it found you," Rodney replied. Vega looked at both men. "This case is going to take months, but internal affairs is going to press for permanent removal. That precinct is being audited top to bottom. Coulson and Mercer are being investigated for more than just your arrest." "What else?" Terrence asked. "Tampering with evidence, illegal searches, targeting black drivers in specific neighborhoods. There's even a stash of confiscated property that's gone missing, items that were never entered into inventory." Rodney muttered, "Jesus." Terrence leaned back. "All that, and I get cuffed for reporting a car." "No good deed goes unpunished," Rodney said, then added quietly, but sometimes it starts something bigger. By Friday afternoon, Terrence was back at work. It felt strange walking through the same courthouse halls like nothing had happened. But people noticed. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations paused as he passed. The story had spread fast. Though Terrence never asked to be the center of anything, he was now the face tied to a question people had been asking for years. What happens when the people we trust the most get it wrong? In the break room, someone had left a newspaper on the table. Two officers resign amid allegations. Justice Department expands internal probe. Rodney walked in holding a mug. Meeting in the main conference room. U.S. attorneys coming by. Wants to talk to the staff about what's next. Terrence looked up from his coffee. Do I have to go? They didn't ask for you specifically, but I think it matters that you're in the room. 20 minutes later, Terrence sat near the back wall of the conference room as a woman in a gray suit addressed the courthouse staff. She spoke calmly. The Department of Justice would be launching a broader oversight initiative. The precinct on 4th Street would operate under federal review for the foreseeable future. More actions were pending. No one clapped. No one cheered. This wasn't a victory parade. It was a reckoning. After the meeting, a younger employee from Archives approached Terrence near the elevator. Hey, I just wanted to say what happened to you was messed up. I don't know how you stayed so calm. He gave a small shrug. Didn't really feel like I had a choice. You could have made a scene, screamed, fought back. Terrence shook his head. That's not me. And it wouldn't have helped. She nodded slowly. I'm glad you spoke up. Some of us needed to see it's possible to still make a difference. Terrence gave a small, tired smile. Just don't let them forget it happened. Later that week, the city council announced a public hearing. It wasn't just about Colson and Mercer anymore. Other citizens had started coming forward. A teacher pulled over without cause. A teenager frisked for walking home late. A single mother threatened with arrest when she asked for a badge number. Patterns that had been whispered about for years were now being spoken aloud. And there was Terrence, sitting quietly in the third row, listening. He didn't testify. His presence alone added weight to every story told. By the end of the session, the mayor announced a new civilian review board, independent, transparent, accountable. As people filed out, a local pastor patted Terrence on the back. Sometimes God doesn't need a loud man, he just needs a steady one. Back at home, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror, looking at his reflection. The man staring back wasn't different. Same eyes, same tired lines, same calm. But something had shifted, not in who he was, but in how the world saw him. Even when the storm passed, the quiet that follows demands just as much strength. A month later, Terrence found himself at the East Raleigh Community Center. It was a neighborhood meeting. Folding chairs, a few trays of cookies, lukewarm coffee. Just regular people who wanted to talk. He hadn't planned on speaking, but when someone mentioned what happened to him, all heads turned his way. The room went quiet. Terrence shifted in his seat. Rodney leaned over. You might as well say something. Terrence stood up slowly. No notes, no speech, just experience sitting heavy on his shoulders. I didn't ask to be part of this, he began, voice steady. I didn't wake up that morning thinking my name would be in a headline. I just saw something that didn't sit right and thought it was my responsibility to say something. He looked around the room. What happened after that wasn't about me. It was about how easy it is for people to forget they're dealing with human beings, not a uniform, not a stereotype, a person. He paused. I was called a liar, cuffed like a criminal, all while doing what I thought was right. And I'll be honest, I thought twice about speaking up ever again. A woman in the front row nodded slowly. But the truth is, silence lets broken things stay broken. Sometimes you got to be the wrench in the system, even when it costs you peace. Someone clapped softly, then another, then a few more. I didn't want recognition. I wanted fairness, not just for me, for all the people who've been through worse and never got their names in the paper. When the meeting ended, folks came up one by one, shaking his hand, thanking him, sharing their own stories. It wasn't closure, but it was connection. Back at home that night, Terrence allowed himself a moment of quiet. He looked through his emails and noticed one from a local high school. The principal wanted him to speak at their justice and civics class. Nothing formal, just tell your story. He smiled faintly. Maybe it was worth it. If his story could keep one kid from being silenced, or one officer from repeating a mistake, then the long walk through that precinct hallway had meaning. Not all change starts with big marches or speeches. Sometimes it starts when one person says, "This doesn't feel right," and refuses to look away. Terrence never wanted attention. He just wanted to go home. Now he had the chance to help others do the same. If this story moved you, if it made you think or remember something you've seen or lived, don't just scroll past. Speak up when it matters, because silence doesn't fix anything. Sometimes the quietest voices change the loudest wrongs.